Welcome to Sarter TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton. Today we're talking with Charlene Lee, founder and CEO of Altimeter Group and the author of Engaged Leader, and we'll be talking with her from California. Charlene, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start by hearing a little bit about your career journey. You have such an interesting background, going from research to online publishing to starting your own business and being named one of the top women in technology. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Sure. I started in journalism coming straight out of business school. And this is back in 1993. And there was this new thing called the internet. There wasn't even a World Wide Web yet. And I realized I wanted to be a part of it. And I figured that content and newspapers would be one of the first things to move online, just given the nature of journalism. So I struck out for San Jose, worked at the San Jose Mercury News in the middle of Silicon Valley. And that's where I started meeting people like Jerry Yang and Mark Andreessen and all these early pioneers, and just became so involved in the space. Went from there into more journalism in Boston, and then decided to have a family. Took time to get out of that and become an analyst, which I thought I'd do for just 2 years. And here I am today, still doing it. I just love being an author, writing, doing research. And about 8 years ago, I had a chance to start my own company, Altimeter Group. And I've been doing that since then.
What has made you so successful in this process?
I think that the key thing that I've been able to do is to take very complex new ideas, like what is this social media thing, and explain it so that people can understand it, and then to be able to use it and act on it. It's not enough for me just to write about theory. I really want to make the ideas pop and to make them usable. And I'm such a pragmatic person, but also optimistic, because I see the possibilities that technology and the new ways it can bring people together, but I also want to be able to make it useful.
What role have mentors played in your career, and who have been some of your mentors?
I'm always jealous of people who say, I have this great mentor who's helped me throughout my career. I can't point to a single person who's played that role, but I can point to a huge network of people who I feel have really come into my life and my career at key and crucial points. One key person has been Roger Martin. He was a partner at my consulting firm Monitor, and then was the dean of the University of Toronto Business School, the Rotman School of Business. And just so helpful at key points in my career, giving me advice and counsel on what to do. Early in my career, Kathy Yates, who was my manager at the San Jose Mercury News, again, somebody steeped in this space, but also a mom, a role model in so many ways. She just gave me great advice early in my career, before I even had kids, about how to think about a career path and how to make that work as a working mom.
That's invaluable. Do you see it going more from mentors to networks generally? Are we shifting that way?
I do see the fact that this traditional model of a mentor, if you can find one, that's great, but people are so busy and our careers change so much that you really need to think about it more as a network of people you can turn to. And that as your needs change, that you probably will have to move on and work in different ways. It's interesting because, I'm well into my 25th year of being in a career, and now the people who used to be my mentors, I'm kind of mentoring them.
Interesting.
In some areas too. So it's kind of a reversal in so many ways, but it just goes back to the fact that we're constantly learning, and what we have to learn and renew ourselves with is going to constantly change.
What advice do you typically give young people who are entering the business world today?
The advice I give to young people is think about what you want to do 18 months from now. It's too hard to think about 5 years, 10 years. I would never have been able to tell anybody that I would be writing books, I would be an analyst. What's an analyst? I mean, what do you do? It's not a career choice that you make and plan for typically. The most you can do is to plan for 18 months, because in 18 months, you will have mastered the job that you are in right now. And in that time, you're going to be thinking about, well, what do I do next to continue to grow? And I find that people who do well in their careers are always looking for that next opportunity where they can really expand themselves and grow. So 18 months from now, how will you be growing? How will you be challenging yourself and be looking for those opportunities now before that time actually comes?
What would you say has been the biggest challenge of your career so far? And how did you face that and overcome it?
I think, and people have often told me that I'm just far too nice. And so it has been a great advantage when I'm establishing relationships and trying to connect with people. So I form really deep relationships, but I also find that it gets in my way when I need to be tough, when I need to be the manager, hold people accountable. So my career has been constantly, how do I assert myself? And I hear often, and I talk to a lot of people who have problems with this. In so many ways, I do think of myself as assertive, but it's when I have that personal relationship with people that it really becomes not so much of a strength, but also a crutch that I really have to be very aware of. So from a career and leadership point of view, knowing what your weaknesses are and being able to be aware of them, I think is a really key and important thing to do. I'm not nice all the time anymore, but I always try to be fair, and that has changed my mindset. I really want to be fair to people. It may not always feel nice, it doesn't feel good, but I am trying to be fair.
I feel like you're right. A lot of people do struggle with that, perhaps especially women, since we're socialized that way. How do you exercise that muscle as you work with your awareness of how it can be a pro or a con?
I think that the hardest thing sometimes is to give people negative feedback, constructive feedback, telling them that they're not doing something right. It's so hard to tell people they're failing. But if you keep at the center, my relationship with this person can only develop if I'm truthful with them and I'm honest with them. Because if I don't do that, I'm being not nice. I'm not being fair to them. And I'm hurting them rather than helping them. So I've developed an ability to say, I need to have a conversation with you. And it's from that place of me caring for you and having empathy for you that I need to give you this feedback. And because of that strong relationship that I have, I can leverage that being nice part of it. Well, again, being very direct, very constructive, and being very fair. Because in the end, it's not fair to them if I don't tell them what's going on. And when it comes to negotiating, when it comes to asserting myself, standing up for myself, I'm much more able to do that now because that sense of confidence that I am doing the right thing for that person by saying something that would normally have felt really difficult to do, I now comes from a place where I actually am being helpful. And that is at the core of who I am.
So you've advised some renowned organizations. You've started a company of your own. What have you learned about leadership, effective leadership, in that journey?
One of the things I always admire about leaders is how they get things done. I constantly feel like I don't get enough things done, and yet people who watch me and see me feel like I get so much done, but it doesn't ever feel like that. And the leaders who I really admire just have this strong sense of accountability. They've created a culture of accountability, and yet do it in such a personal way where people want to be accountable. They want to be held accountable and see it as a positive rather than as something that's a negative. So I really admire leaders who have built such strong connections and alignment and relationships with the people who are following them that they can get that kind of commitment and feel very confident that everybody is doing their job.
Well, on that note, let's get into your book, The Engaged Leader. There's a lot of buzz out there about this book and how the practical advice that it gives. What is the central thesis or theme of The Engaged Leader?
The central theme for The Engaged Leader is that in this digital space where all of our customers, employees are connecting with each other through these digital channels, you as a leader have to be able to have a strategy of how you exert your leadership through these channels too, because in the end, leadership is really about relationships. And if you don't know how you're going to establish and deepen these relationships with key customers and key employees using these digital tools, it's like cutting off your right arm. how can you begin to function in this space and have credibility as a leader if you can't do this?
Who's the target audience of the engaged leader, and what is sort of the big idea that you want them to take away?
The target audience for the book are executives and leaders of organizations throughout a company or even a nonprofit or a community group. And the message I wanted them to take away is that being a leader in these digital channels is different than just being an individual. We all use Facebook and YouTube, but when you're a leader, when you put on that mantle, put on that cape of being a leader, you have to change your perspective. How do you lead? How do you get things done with the connections that you can draw through these channels? And that's very different than just connecting with people. And I think in many ways, fantastic leaders are fantastic leaders. And they have to develop the confidence to know how they will be a leader in these digital channels. And it's an extension of their leadership that they already know and have. I would much rather take a leader who's a great leader and teach them how to use these digital channels than to take somebody who's kind of early on in their leadership journey but who's really good with these tools and try to teach them how to be a leader. The first one's a lot easier. And what I oftentimes find is that leaders get caught up in like, how do I use this tool or that tool? What can it be used for? I want them to step back and just go back to the core, what makes them a leader, the way they practice leadership, and discover the way that they will choose to have a strategy, a plan, be intentional, and choose to engage with these channels rather than leave it to be a foregone conclusion that they're not going to use it.
You raise up Jenny Rometty in particular as a model leader for a new era. Why do you call her that?
I use Jenny Rometty as Jenny Rometty, the CEO of IBM, I think is a great model for being an engaged leader, even though she doesn't have a Twitter account. I actually had a chance to talk with her last week, and we're talking about her ability to be engaged. And she said that the key reason she doesn't use Twitter is that she didn't feel she could be truly authentic, that she could be an effective leader in that channel. And she felt very confident that she didn't need to be there. People didn't need to have her be there for her to be effective. And that her time and effort was going to be spent internally inside of IBM. That's where she really needed to exert her leadership. So she's constantly doing videos, participating in forums, doing jams with people, interacting in conversation groups in a place where she felt she could be really authentic. And I think she's a fantastic role model for this because she has made a choice. She's done a strategy of what she will do, and just as importantly, what she won't do to be an effective leader in the digital channel.
So digital transformation is happening so quickly. What do the drivers of digital transformation mean for leaders?
I think there are 3 digital transformation drivers. The first one is really this whole idea of being connected with people through these social channels. The second is the sense that people can be mobile. They can work anywhere and everywhere. And the third is data. There's so much data now, information and content that is available. And these 3 drivers, social connections, mobility, and data, mean that the way you establish relationships, and in particular how you will be a leader, has fundamentally changed. If these are the ways that you can understand and develop relationships with people, then you have to be able to understand and master these 3 areas and understand how they can make you more effective. Can you leverage the social connectivity that's out there to scale? Can you use the mobile tools and understand how they're being used so that when anybody needs to reach you and you want to be reached, how do you make those connections? And then finally, how do you use data to your advantage? How do you listen and really understand all the things that are happening and be able to master all of that data that's coming at you and to be able to make sense of it? Leadership used to be so easy. You just have to stand up in a room, shake people's hands and look them in the eye and say, are we good? Right? And now we have to know how to do that digitally in order to be an effective leader.
So the history of business, as everybody knows, is a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of power and influence that's based on your pay grade or your position or how long you've been there. And all of that is really changing. But how has that challenged organizational culture today and how it works and how we're moving forward?
The traditional hierarchy of an organization with a small number of leaders at the top and lots of people, like a traditional pyramid structure, is really starting to fray because of these new communications. When I want to get something done, it's typically not with somebody who's in my department. It could be somebody in a completely different office, different department, different company even.
Yeah.
And those structures are now, I have this great picture of, instead of a pyramid, it looks like, zigzags, and it's a mess. And I think leadership is no longer based on your position in that hierarchy. A leader just simply means somebody who has followers. And it says they're listening to you and they're looking to you for some inspiration to take action. And a leader says, we're going to go and work in this direction. Who's going to follow me? And you are a leader if people follow you. It's that simple. So in this day and age, hierarchies still make a lot of sense because it kind of help define how people are going to work together. But the real fact is the way we do work is no longer based on hierarchies. So leadership is no longer based on your position or title. It's based on what you get done. And can you get people to follow you to get those things done? It's simply that.
What does it mean to listen at scale? And why is this important?
When I think about engaged leadership, the first thing leaders have to do is to listen at scale. And what I mean by that is there's so much data now being put out there by customers, by employees. It's a great opportunity for you to listen. And listening is the foundation for relationships. Again, leadership is just the relationship between leaders and followers. So if you really want to inspire followers, you better know what inspires them. What are they paying attention to? What matters? How do they want to be communicated to? And this is your chance because there's so much data now. You can do this. Now, in the past, if you wanted to listen, it was really hard. You had to do surveys, you had to do focus groups, and not very much real time. Now you just go online and do a search. You just follow other people, and you can see it instantaneously on your phone, on your iPad. And the key thing here is you're no longer listening with your ears, you're listening with your eyes. You can scan and see information so much faster. So the top executives who are really good at this, they just flip through the comments. They look and follow strategically the people you want to listen to. So listening at scale says knowing who you want to listen to and being able to listen to them on a constant basis to be able to establish that relationship.
You say that sharing is an art and a science. How can leaders share to shape, as you say?
After you listen to people, the next thing you can do is to start sharing with them too. And sharing is when you tell a story that will inspire people to take actions. And the art of storytelling and being able to use sharing to establish relationships is knowing what stories people want to hear from you. And that again comes from really good listening. But the science of this says, how do you do this so that you can scale it? You can do this in an efficient way. And there are many tools to be able to do things like scheduling, being able to tell that story in multiple channels. And so the digital space allows you to tell stories in many, many different ways, but that story has to come from that leader and be inspired by what they think what kind of stories will actually inspire people to take actions.
Why is it so important that leaders engage so deeply in order to transform their organization? Tell us a little about that.
For many leaders, it's easy to think about listening, and sure, they can share stories too. They love to be able to talk. I've never met a leader who didn't like to talk. But it's another thing, though, when you're asked to engage, and this is where many leaders stop, because engagement says it's a two-way dialogue. And if it's a two-way dialogue, you get to ask me questions and challenge me. So I find the leaders who are really good at being engaged digitally are also engaged offline. They want a special kind of relationship with their followers where it is a lot of give and take, where that follower is treated like almost an equal and a partner. And they're asked to challenge the leader. And not all leaders are comfortable doing this and not secure enough to be authentic and vulnerable and human. So when we talk about digital and social, we oftentimes say, yeah, just go be authentic and human. But you may be saying that to a leader who isn't that way in real life.
Right.
And comfortable with that. So I think engagement is hard for leaders in general because it does say you're going to open yourself up to a dialogue. You're going to open yourself up to criticism. And you better be ready to take that. And so I think it's transformational because it changes that fundamental relationship. If people always saw you as a leader who dictated things, but then all of a sudden you say, come in, I'm opening the door. I want a different type of relationship with you, that changes and transforms that relationship. So the transformation isn't about processes or technologies. It's really about a transformation in the relationships between people. And if you can change an organization by fundamentally changing the role and the way that people interact with each other, that's changing culture. It's changing the way you think about failure. It's changing the empowerment in the sense that people can take action and move faster, that it doesn't have to come through an organizational structure for you to ask permission. That's real transformation and one that's very, very difficult for your competitors to copy.
Share with us one of your real-world examples of a leader who has come out of hiding and sort of made this type of leadership and engagement transformation.
One of my favorite leaders that I highlight in the book is Rosemary Turner. She is an African-American woman, as she would say, I'm no spring chicken. And she is the manager for UPS in the Northern California district. So she manages 17,000 people who are in warehouses and brown trucks driving all around the Bay Area. And she decided that and found out that her drivers in particular were constantly on Twitter checking in and communicating with each other. So she said, I need to get on this Twitter thing. So she asked her communications person, can you help me figure out how to use this? And her leadership goal was to change the relationship so that people felt like they were more connected to her and to support an open door policy that UPS has. That if you ever have a problem, you could go and knock on Rosemary's door. And when she started doing this, she found that more and more people were actually knocking on her door, either physically or on Twitter. And people felt more connected to her. So she posts pictures of herself out in the field, in the community. She's putting out postings, reminders to people, safety first. And it's those kinds of messages, her ability to communicate and connect with her team members, 17,000 of them potentially through these channels, means that they're hearing from her more often. And you're seeing just how wonderful and warm and human she is. And that changes the relationship that they have with her.
How do listening, sharing, and engaging help to attract the best people and to keep the best employees?
I think in many ways, these fundamental things of listening, sharing, and engaging is what any and every employee wants in their relationship with their employer. They want to be listened to. They want to be able to share stories themselves or hear stories being shared so they can make a connection and have alignment with what are we trying to achieve. And engagement says, hey, you have an opinion, you have a brain, please use it. Please engage with us. Don't just sit there and do your job and not be an active participant in this. So I think organizations with leaders who embrace listening, sharing, and engaging are going to attract the best quality and the best followers and nurture the best leaders. And what organization wouldn't want that? And to be able to have such an engaged workforce and leadership trying to achieve and do great things.
Tell us a little more about how making these kinds of changes will actually spark market growth.
Well, market growth comes from, again, one of two things. Either you have a product that people really, really want, or in particular, the market is really growing. And there aren't very many markets where things are explosively growing unless you can tap into an untapped need. And so I think listening, sharing, and engaging with your customer base in particular can really give you an edge because you understand your customers so much better. You understand their needs and maybe even their unmet needs. So being able to establish that relationship, having a privileged dialogue with them, not just as a single person, the leader of a group, but the entire organization. because everybody has a potential to be a leader when it comes to working with your customers, then that takes that level of innovation and discovery and ability to engage and grow new markets to an exponential level. Instead of having a small number of people in your innovation department, you've got to think about your entire organization and employee base as an innovation department. That is what leads to explosive growth.
How can you employ the ideas in your book to create an amazing experience for your customers?
One of the things about creating an amazing experience for customers is really understanding their journey. And there's no better way to do that than to listen at scale to what are they doing across all those different parts of the journey. Really, truly listening to what they're saying. And it may not even be just about your product. I think brands and marketers make the mistake too often of narrowing just what are they saying about my product or service. You should be really understanding their entire journey and understanding what are the fundamental needs that they are trying to address and how you could potentially meet those needs that aren't even being expressed directly by them. That takes a lot of listening. It takes a lot of engagement with them to hone in on that question and that issue. So creating a great experience means really understanding the person you're trying to create an experience for. And just as importantly, respecting the fact that they are on a journey and a relationship, and you may or may not be a part of that. And so I think oftentimes when people think about an experience, it always ends with a purchase of their product, right? If you really, truly want to respect that journey, they may never be a purchase, or that purchase could be years down the line. Or even better, they know about you. They understand it. They don't think it's the right fit for you, but they may recommend you to somebody where it would be a good fit. So really looking at that journey and that experience on multiple relationships and having respect for that relationship, I think is a key part. Otherwise, I start feeling like a rat. I feel like you've designed a maze for me and you're trying to steer me towards this maze, down this path into the mousetrap so you can catch me. You can always feel that when you're talking to a company that's focused on the journey versus creating an experience and honoring where I am in my journey and helping me have the experience that meets my needs at that time and respecting that I'll figure out the next step and time and you'll be there to help me with my next step in the journey.
So you've also written a couple of other best-selling books, including Open Leadership and Groundswell. What do you see coming in social? What's coming next? What should we be looking for? What's going to be impacting us in the future?
I do believe that the next phase for social and digital, frankly, is inside the enterprise. We've optimized so many things like the customer relationship, how we do advertising, how we do e-commerce. And I think the next phase is really about how do we take this incredible asset, our employees, and really galvanize that and harness the incredible power and intellect and enthusiasm and frankly the advocacy that could become just an explosive power in the marketplace. So oftentimes we say employees are our biggest assets, but when I ask them, do you trust your employees to go out there and speak on your behalf? They go, no, not at all. In fact, we don't even trust them to be able to use these social tools, so we block them. And of course, what do? They turn off the VPNs and the IPs, and they go rogue, and they just go online anyways, where you can't track them and be able to harness that. So I think we need to think about our fundamental relationships inside of organizations with employees. And the social connectivity channels, the digital channels, can give us better ways to manage the governance of employees using digital tools, but also change the nature of that relationship, the fundamental trust of employees. So leadership is a fundamental aspect of this, which is where I began with that. But I do believe that organizations that would be truly innovative, truly disruptive, can only do this if employees and leaders are completely aligned in this new model of empowerment and authenticity in the way that they work.